So hi everyone, thank you for joining us for the final session in the Scholarly Summer Writing Institute. So today we'll be discussing section 4, from analysis to writing, how to begin writing your research findings. So first I'd like to introduce Veronica from Dissertation by Design.
Hi, everyone. Happy to be here today and excited about talking about analysis and moving our way into writing. I have been working with doc students for just over 13 years now in one capacity or the other. In the last almost three of those years, it's been with Dissertation by Design, in which I help young scholars develop their skills in writing and research. So happy to be here. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Veronica. And then to introduce our software expert, so for Citavi, Jennifer Schultz will be taking us through that software. So hi, Jenny.
Hi, everyone.
And for NVivo, we've Laura, one of our certified platinum NVivo trainers, who will take us through how to use NVivo with your analysis. Hi, Laura.
Hi, everyone. Laura Lagendijk coming to you today from the foothills of the Rocky Mountains in southern Alberta, Canada. Really looking forward to showing you how you can arrange your codes to help you think about how you're going to write all of your findings.
And for today's agenda, what we're doing is we're going to do something a little different, which I think is going to be exciting. So we're going to be integrating how to use the software with Veronica talking about how you can analyze your data and manage it. So Veronica is going to be looking at data management and analysis and how to plan your overview, data cleanup and memoing, initial coding with NVivo, so that'll be Laura, and then pattern matching and organizations, theme identification and definitions, and beginning writing. And like I said, so Citavi and NVivo will be integrated into the presentation, which I think will be really interesting to watch. And then at the end, we'll take questions.
Okay, thanks, Stacy. Yeah, so we thought we'd show Citavi first because Veronica's going to be focusing on how you can analyze your research findings and then start writing them up. And with Citavi, you can use this program to write up your paper as a whole. So let me get into my slides and then you'll see. So Citavi is a program for note-taking and reference management, and it lets you collaborate, take notes, write, and manage citations all within one platform. So typically you'll have these steps in the research process. Even if you're not doing original research, like a survey instrument or something like that, and analyzing surveys or something else. If you're doing humanities research, you might also have this kind of flow here. So with Citavi, you can bring in information, analyze it in the program, bring all of that into an outline, and then bring it over to Word. And the program helps you stay really organized throughout the whole process, which we'll see in just a second. And since we're talking about analyzing your research findings today, and a lot of you are NVivo users, I wanted to look at how Citavi and NVivo kind of interconnect. So Citavi you can think of as being for work with your supporting literature. So anything that you're using for your literature review, anything that's backing up some of your own findings or theories, and anytime you're referring to someone else's work in your own work. And so it helps with finding and organizing those sources. It helps you then when you're reading your sources to take notes and bring all that into an outline, helps with task planning to keep you on track. And then you can bring everything over to Word and stay very organized. And then NVivo is more for the analysis of your research, your original research. And you can use it then for coding, transcription, data visualization, all of those kind of higher level analysis things that you might be doing. And the two programs overlap a little bit in that you can take notes with both and you can use both for literature reviews. It's just maybe a little bit of a different focus. So with Citavi, you can go through and excerpt quotations or take notes on an article, and NVivo gives you some extra tools for that. So you can do some automated analysis that lets you pull out themes across the literature. So it's a little bit of a different feature set for both. So today you can really think of that as we're going to look at how Citavi helps you with all the supporting literature and how you would have that in your paper. And then Veronica will show you, Veronica and Laura will show you how you would be working with your findings and then writing those up. Okay, so we'll look at very briefly how you can save notes, categorize notes, move things around in your outline and make connections, and then bring all of that over to Word, and how you can work with a document created in NVivo even. So if you're exporting your coding or something like that, you can build upon that with Citavi and insert citations, and how you can then use the chapter view. So that's it for the PowerPoint. Let's jump right into Citavi. For those of you who are in the first session, I'm reusing that project we looked at there. So this is a project that's not too far along. I only have a few references at the moment, but you can imagine if you've been working for a while, you might have hundreds and hundreds of references that you've gathered. Here, we'll just go and look at this Quotations and Comments tab. In this middle section here, you have all the information for a particular source. And these are just the notes then that I've taken while reading the different papers that I have here. And you can see that you can jump right to a note that you've taken. And we'll just make this a little bit bigger. So this is an example of something that I wouldn't have wanted to just cite as a direct quotation, because it's yeah, a little hard to parse if you're just reading it all like this. And the most important thing for me for the finding that I'm looking at is this 25% improvement. So that's a note that I've saved. And the way you do that is you would just highlight what you want in the document. And this is a paraphrase here, so I just typed up my own assessment of that. And this is then a sentence that I can take into Word and use later on. So you can already sort of pre-formulate some of your writing when you're doing this analysis of your texts. And let's just see, we have a few other ones here. You can add your own comments or summaries. So these, you see they have this sort of broken link symbol. These don't link up anywhere in the text. They're just general summaries or a general comment. But this is all important for later on when you're bringing your notes together and deciding where things should go in your outline. And here, I'll take a look at that. And this then would be a comment that's tied to the text. And let's just do one of these so you see how that works. So you just would highlight and then you choose if you want it to be a direct quotation, for example, or an indirect quotation, a paraphrase, or a comment. And if you like to read quickly and just pull things out as you go, you can first highlight and then you can convert the highlights later on to, we call them knowledge items, if you think it's something worth saving. So it supports all reading styles. So let's just save that as a direct quotation. If you decide, oh, I don't want that as a direct quotation, I want to change that. And maybe here I'll make that a comment. And limitations of study. And then I can replace that with my own assessment. And you can then already start thinking when you're reading about which category you're going to put that in. And this was about teaching interventions, so I'll put that in there. And then all of these notes that you save in Citavi, you can see in this knowledge organizer section just by going to the top here. And you can subdivide these different sections of your outline that you create. You can move sections around. This is very flexible. So, if I wanted a subsection here, that was studies, then I could do that, and you can get pretty detailed. Maybe something like surveys. So you can make this outline very detailed so that it really later kind of fits what you want to have in your paper or thesis or book project, whatever you happen to be working on. And you can, in the knowledge organizer, compare different items just by clicking this sentence here. This is the core statement. So that's just always when you're creating one of these items, you can create your own summary of the text that you've saved. And that's just helpful in this view because then you can jog your memory faster and don't have to read the whole text that you excerpted or that you saved. And if something then, when you're comparing the different items here in the knowledge organizer, if it sparks a new idea, you can hit this thought button and then save your own idea in Citavi as well. So for example, if you identify a gap in the research, then you could add that. So that's kind of Citavi in a nutshell. There are a lot of other features as well, but this is usually then what you would do before going to start to write. And the more you work in Citavi and keep track of the different ideas and statistics and things in what you're reading, and the more you bring that into an outline and really think about how things go together, the easier your writing process is going to be, especially for things like your literature review. And we can now take that over to Word. And I just want to show you, this is a document that was exported from NVivo. So it's coding, I believe. And so when you're writing up a literature review, for example, you can export your coding. And of course, this isn't really yet in any kind of fluid format or anything, but you would have all those notes from NVivo, all the coding from NVivo, and then you can add in any references you need from Citavi and any of those notes that you took on the literature in Citavi. So I'll just connect up my Word document with this project. Oops, and actually I want the project we were just working on, not that other project. So we'll change that. It's pretty easy to do in Citavi. So I'll go back to this oral health education project. And now when I want to start writing, I have all my references at my fingertips. I have my outline, and I have all of those pieces of information I've saved and some of my kind of pre-writing texts that I've created in Citavi, so my own ideas, and I have them arranged in the order that I think I'll use them. And of course, it's not always this simple, you'll start in Citavi, but then when you go to Word, these things will get moved around, and that's fine. That's just the nature of how it's going to be. I think nobody is this, well, maybe there are some perfect type A personalities who do everything in Citavi and have it all mapped out and then bring it over to Word and then just make these connecting sentences and they're good to go. But most of us, when you're writing, you're going to change this around, and that's fine. But it gives you a very good start, and it gives you a very organized way of proceeding when you're starting to write. So let's insert some of these categories. And this one, for example, is creative approaches. Well, we'll just insert, I think, the whole thing, and then we can move some things around later on. So we'll go back here, and we'll assert our categories of knowledge items, and we'll make sure that this isn't checked here. If you include the knowledge items, then everything is inserted into your document. And we really just want the categories, and then we'll pull the items from over here. All right, so now we have everything in there. And if this coding is related to this section, then maybe I'll just move a few of these around. You can also insert the headings for your outline one by one, but I thought this would be a little faster. Okay. And now when I go into this chapter view, I'll see the references that I have for a particular section, and I think for most of them, here we go. So most of them are in this teaching intervention section. So I see my references that I have, and then I have all of these pieces of information. And I can then look down here and see that text, and if I want to use it, I can insert that. And if I have, let's see, I think we don't have a direct quote, but if I have something like this indirect quote here, I can insert that, and it's going to put the reference in as well and format it in the correct citation style. And then if we were down here in this creativity section, so looking at creative approaches to oral health education, if I had saved anything in that category, then I would have it here. Let's maybe go back to a project and just do that quick. So let's add, you can always go back and change and add categories. You can have multiple categories as well. So put that in that category there. And let's just add the reference in there too, so you see what that looks like. Add this one here. Okay. And so now if I go back in here, yeah, I'll see my what I saved for that category. And then if you had some coding that you later want to, maybe quote or something that you took from NVivo, then it's quite easy to just insert a citation if you need that. And here, then I'd probably go back and also look for the page number and just add that page number in. And one last thing I want to show you is that you can quickly change the citation style. Right now, this is in the Citavi default style, but we'll want to change that to something we actually will be submitting the paper in. So let's use APA. And then it's going to update everything and make sure that all of those citations are correct as well. And so there you see that it's changed now from publication bibliography to references. So Citavi is a nice way of, it offers a nice way of staying organized when you're writing. You have everything at your fingertips when you're going through. And then, you don't have to search around for your notes. You've already thought about how things fit together a bit. And then you can kind of focus on making the connections even better between the different pieces of information you've saved and your own ideas. And with that, I think I'll hand it over to Veronica, who will show you then in a lot more detail how you would go about taking your research findings and then moving to the writing up phase. So let's jump back into that project. Yeah, so a direct quotation, you do it kind of the same way. You just highlight the sentence or paragraph or whatever text you want, and then there's just the different options up here. So for a direct quotation, it's going to pull in that exact text, and then usually you'll Also want to give it some quotation marks, but you always know it's a direct quotation because of the color as well. So just something to keep in mind when you're later on writing up your paper. So that's basically the direct quotation. Same as always, you can make a core statement here. Definition of mouth, something like that. And then for an indirect quotation, you would, just like with the direct quotation, highlight the text and then choose indirect quotation. And then you would create your paraphrase. And then it's your own words that you're putting in here. So I might say, yeah, children's doctors can do oral health screenings. Probably want to rephrase it a little bit more. And then you could add, or maybe this is my paraphrase here, and then you could put a little core statement up there. Usually if you're paraphrasing, you might have a meatier sentence than this one here, or you might have a few sentences or a paragraph, but that's the basic idea.
All right, everyone, thanks so much for being here. Let me go forward a couple of slides. Today, during our time together, well, first of all, let me thank Jenny. Jenny, I can totally see how we can use Citavi in our chapter, our findings chapter, if the university requires that we use citations in there, but definitely in our chapter 5 or our conclusions chapter, definitely be a place for Citavi to help us out. So thank you for that information and demonstration. All right, so today we'll be understanding how analysis is the first step in the writing up of the findings. We'll be learning how to make sure that our findings align with not only our research questions, but our research design, and also how to visualize or picture, if you will, the structure of your findings based on your research design. And then how to transition from your analysis to writing. And with that comes understanding the formula that happens with our writing when we move into analysis. And within all of this, we're going to see from Laura how NVivo can also support us in our analysis and our writing. So I'll be presenting for about 20-ish minutes, and then Laura is going to take over and show you some different things in NVivo, and then I'll come back and finish up the presentation. Okay, so before we get started here, let's go with our first poll. Where are you in the analysis and writing process? Are you just beginning? Have you finished your first cycle coding? Have you finished all your coding and are ready to determine themes, or you have your themes and you're ready to write, or you already have started writing? And if you haven't begun the analysis process at all, just put number 1 and we'll go with that. And I'll mention some things that you can be thinking about if you're not yet collected data. All right. The majority of people are just beginning analysis, and then we have some people who finished coding and determining themes, ready to write, and then 16% already writing. All right, perfect. Thank you for doing that. Our next slide here, if I can get it to function. Let's see. There we go. So there are basically two. I'm going to just go over data analysis and qualitative research real quickly. And following that, show you some examples of data analysis in action, if you will, and then briefly discuss some of the designs that are most popular that I encounter in helping doc students and early scholars with their research. So Probably the most common data analysis process, or the type of data analysis in qualitative research, is inductive. And that means that we're starting with the data, the bits of data, and our research question to help guide us in identifying those units of data that are important to us. So we start with codes, then we go up and we start grouping those codes into like meaning. And then the third step, we refine our groups, and they transform, if you will, into themes by us defining them and naming them in a meaningful way, which is the difference between a category and a theme. A category is just a name, a theme carries meaning. Oops. All right, our next, our next type of analysis is the top-down deductive analysis. This means we start with pre-existing categories. For example, if you're using a theory or a model to analyze the data, that's called deductive analysis. And that will kind of go through the same problem in process in step 2. We identify the patterns within those categories, and we group them with like meaning. And then the third step is identifying the nuances of meaning in each group. So if you're thinking about this in inductive, we start with the little parts and move up to the bigger parts of the themes. In the top-down process, we start with the big parts, the categories, and we go downwards to understand the patterns within and the nuances of meaning within those categories. Okay? So here's an example of an inductive coding process that I've recently worked on. I have my research question front and center because that helps guide me in how I'm coding. When I start coding, I'm just trying to get the essence of what the participants are trying to tell me in relationship to my research question. Now, just as a caveat, if I have 2 or 3 research questions, I want to list them at the top as well. However, I might only code for one research question when I first begin so that I can get used to that, looking for that understanding, okay? So we see, overwhelmed feelings, we see planning, speaking, this idea of cognition here, memorizing, reading, speaking. We're seeing a difficult process. And then down below here, we see 2 things of attention to the audience, and then this idea of maybe practice. And if you'll notice real quick, I do have some question marks. And when I go through coding, whether it is by hand or in NVivo, I really try to leave notes to myself, like, I'm not sure if this is the case, but I'm going to put a question mark here, or I'll actually leave myself a note in the comments if I'm using Word, or in an annotation or memo if I'm using NVivo. So the codes that I have so far are difficulties, planning, cognition, feelings and emotions, and then attention to audience. And we'll see how, if I were to continue, that code list would get much, much larger, okay? Now let's look at a deductive analysis example. So here, if I'm using language anxiety theory, it has 3 aspects: anxiety itself, the effects of anxiety, and then the strategies to deal with anxiety. You can already tell in my coding the differences in just through the colors, because I only have 2 groups right here. Now, I think I had 5 on the previous slide. So you can see how we're really starting at that top level. Now, in the parentheses here under anxiety, I have identified time. Time might end up, and it actually did, being one of those nuances of meaning within this category of anxiety. And it was specific to the Paycheck Kucha presentations, which is interesting in and of itself, and which is why I coded it, because remember I have to keep connecting back to my research questions. All right. So design matters. What we choose and justify is important for our research, matters in Chapter 4, and specifically Chapter 4, obviously Chapter 3 because we have to describe it, but Chapter 4, it really gives us the structure that we need to be thinking about when we're getting ready to write up our findings. So here's our second poll. What is your research design? Basic, qual, case study, phenomenology or IPA, narrative, ethnography, or something else? All right. All right, so we have a thematic, which is kind of basic. All right, case study, phenomenology. So basic or thematic analysis wins out, so that's good. I like that there are 9% of you that are doing ethnography. That is impressive. I'm so excited. And narrative, we'll talk a little bit more about that and how things might change with those two designs specifically as we go into the writing and the research after we hear from Laura and NVivo. Thank you all for doing that.
And then Veronica, I'll just say people have added phenomenology, or you have that case study, comparative method, grounded theory, content analysis, yeah, obviously critical discourse analysis, so, and multimodal, so, and interpretive description. So those are just some other ones.
Love it.
Yeah.
Love it. Thank you. I'm so, you can tell I'm a geek about qualitative research because I just hear all that, and I want to know about all of your studies and how what you're doing and what your topics are and your processes. It's very exciting. So thank you for doing that. All right. So the first design that we're going to look at is the basic common structure for multiple designs. So we see this design in phenomenology. We see this structure in some grounded theory studies. The difference would be is that instead of themes, we would see the process. The steps in the process would actually take the place of the themes. So from this common structure, we see that we describe the context and the setting, the participants, then the findings, which is the presentation of the data. And we have topics and patterns within those themes. All right. Now, please keep in mind as I go through these structures that it depends what your structure will be based on your committee, based on your university, and based on what you wrote in Chapter 3. So keep that in mind. What you see in the next few slides may or may not coincide with your study, but the essence of this common structure is present in almost all designs. It just looks a little different. Okay, so some universities and committees prefer that you present your themes according to the research questions. So in that case, instead of having 5 themes and we just talk about those themes separately, this would group those themes according to the research question that they most align with. So in this case, we have 2 themes for research question 1 and 3 for research question 2. All right. Now, this is case study has 4 basic designs: 2 overriding designs of single case study and multiple case study or collective case study. And then within those, we have a holistic design and an embedded units of analysis design. So I'm going to go over those each for a single case study and a multiple case study. Interestingly enough, here in this holistic single case study, we see how that common design is right here. I have the context and setting that I need to describe, the participants that I need to describe, and then the themes. The thing about case study that we want to keep in mind is that context is super important. So the context of the organization will need to be explained in detail, as well as perhaps the phenomenon, and sometimes one or the other. All right. The next one describes a single case study with embedded units of analysis. Here we see the themes separated by the type of participant. We see principal data, superintendent data, and trainer data. So again, still kind of the same process. I'll still have topics underneath each one of these themes, but this time it's separated by the participants, which are the unit of analysis. Another example of how the unit analysis might be broken up or structured is that we have the principals separated, because we believe that the superintendents and the trainers and the principals all have something different to contribute. So in this particular structure, we want to highlight that. And then we want to do a cross analysis of these embedded units. And this is kind of exciting because you can really tell the difference between those units of analysis. All right, here we see the multiple case study with the holistic design. If you'll see, each individual case becomes a mini common structure that we talked about from the very beginning. The difference here is that we have, in this case, 3 different cases, 3 different organizations. And then in the bottom here is this cross-case now analysis, where we compare the themes across all cases. All right, this one is an example of an embedded unit of analysis within the multiple case study. Here we have 2 cases, public and private schools, and then we have principals and teachers from 2 schools in each of those cases. And those are those embedded units of analysis. We would still conduct a cross-case analysis. Narrative research has many, many different structures that it can take. The most common, one of the most common is that we could create an overall composite narrative or story, and that can include these areas. They can also include areas that are specific to the phenomenon that you're exploring, okay? And the other type of narrative design is, or structure, if you will, is to highlight each participant. So here we're really concerned with each participant's story. We want to highlight their voices, highlight the experiences that they have had and their stories with a specific phenomenon. In this case, we might have the categories or the themes, if you will, of background, challenges, turning point, and then persistence to future. Now, this particular design really highlights what Clendenin and Conley identify, and Clendenin and many of her students actually, with continuity, interaction, and situation. Continuity is the past, the present, and the future. So here we see background, we see turning point, which could be the present, and then that persistence to future, which is that look to the future. Interaction has to deal with the interaction between oneself and the phenomenon, and interaction with others in relationship to the phenomenon. And then situation has to do with place. These, if you're using Clendenin and Conley, these become really, really important, and that idea of place could potentially come up in all of these themes that we see. Okay, now we get to the aspect of how does analysis and the structure of the design inform our writing of the findings. And what I'm going to talk about as we move forward is this idea of structure in writing. I will, let's see, I'm going to talk about how that structure, how those two interact, and then Laura is going to take over and show us some ideas from NVivo. All right, so here we have the analysis, coding. Remember that coding is our main way to organize the data. If we have no idea, if we just presented the data, it wouldn't work, because now we're asking actually our readers to organize the data and make sense of the data. That's our job as qualitative researchers, to make sense of that data. Unless we're doing participatory action research, in which we would include our participants in this act of understanding the meaning and organizing the data. So this grouping of data, identifying topics within the groups, and determining theme names of those larger groups are key in the writing process. As a matter of fact, they are the beginning of the writing process. And we're going to see how Laura demonstrates this through NVivo, which is really exciting, I think. Again, I'm a bit of a geek here. Anyway, the writing structure, once we have those three things on top with the analysis, now we can determine the order of our themes, whether they are inductive or the categories if we're using deductive, and definitions of the themes and categories. Now, definitions, this is where Citavi might come into play if we're using a deductive analysis process. I could see how we can really pull in those theoretical articles about the model or about the theory and connect them to the definitions, which is fantastic, save us a lot of time. And then lastly, the writing structure that I will come back to when Laura is finished is identifying the external and internal structure for each theme or category. So to get us started here and going towards NVivo, here's our third poll. So are you planning on using NVivo for analysis, or are you? Yes, no, or maybe. Wow, awesome. Woohoo. Well, I say, Laura, take it away.
I'm pretty happy to see 63% of you already thinking about using NVivo. And for those of you in category 3 or even maybe 2, I hope some of what you see today helps you think about that. So I'm just going to show my screen. And great. So we've heard a little bit from Jenny how you can start thinking about the literature and what the notes are. You've been immersed in all of that kind of thinking. And then Veronica showed us how to think about writing, even at the stage as you're starting to do some of your data collection, potentially even your data analysis and so on. And so what I wanted to concentrate mostly on in this part of the demonstration is how NVivo can be used to make all of those things align. So you want, ideally, your literature categories and your paper outline, what you're seeing in your analysis, and so on, all to align. And of course, most importantly, they need to align with your methods. So I'm showing you here the welcome window of NVivo. I like to show you this because I want to show you that I'm using today a version of the sample project that we have built into every copy of NVivo, Mac or Windows. Now this project that I'm showing today has been adapted from what you usually see, and I've done some rearranging of the code so that you can start to think about how you might arrange codes, excuse me, in your project. Sometimes people think of NVivo as being the dictator of what they need to do in their project, and I cannot emphasize enough that NVivo is flexible, malleable, and what you need to do as the primary tool in qualitative research is always the qualitative researcher. What you need to do is kind of take charge of what you want your project to look like and use it to drive your analysis and also align it with the methods that you said you're going to do in your research. So this is the usual coding structure that is built into the sample project, but I wanted to show you today just a little bit of what the progression of themes might be looking like in your coding structure, depending on whether or not you're using an inductive process, as Veronica so greatly described. I find that so clarifying. You're starting from the ground up. Or if you're using a deductive coding process where you're working with some themes and categories potentially identified from literature or previous research or from a survey and so on, and you're going to start with those themes and then see what's present in your data. So what I'm about to show you is not the way to do it. It's an example of how you might do it to get you thinking about what would work in your project. And the first thing I wanted to show you is that we can actually, and some people really like to begin this way, is actually go through and code our data based on, let's say, the interview questions that were asked. And this is a perfectly legitimate way of bringing together all of the information that was asked in question 1, let's say. And if you have fairly structured interview data or a fairly structured focus group or something like that, of course it really works in survey data, but I'm talking mostly about interviews, focus groups, and those kinds of things. You can code all of your questions and create a question code. And some people simply begin their writing by summarizing the answers they saw to those questions. So for instance, if I look here in this question 1 code, I can see all of the answers from across all of the interviews to question 1. Notice that these transcripts have question 1 in a specific heading. When questions are in headings, and if you're using NVivo for Windows, you can actually have NVivo put all of the responses to question 1 in one place by using the auto coding feature. So you can come up to your files and your interview files, and I can select that list of interview files, and I can auto code, and I'm going to go and auto code by the actual style. Now it's not showing up here. My cursor must not be in one of them. Let me check that one more time. Go out of this code and auto code, and then come and use the style or structure. And what NVivo will do is go through the interviews and group all of the responses to question 1 in a question 1 code. So sometimes folks then say, oh, well, I still want to code for themes and the topics and patterns. And of course, you will want to probably almost always do that as well. But I wanted to show you that that's possible. And if you don't have Windows, you're using the Mac version, you can do the same thing quite quickly by just manually coding all of the responses to question 1 to the question 1 code. That can be really helpful when you meet with your committee and they say, well, what are folks saying generally about resource use? And you know that resource use was mostly answered in question 4, and you can look across those answers and give that response quite quickly. Now, if you're actually using, let's switch it up a bit, and you're using that inductive kind of coding process that Veronica talked about, no matter what your actual method is, I wanted to show you an adaptation of the codes that are built into the sample project by having, just showing you the codes and what they might look like at different phases. We rearranged the project for a series of webinars we did earlier this year specific to thematic analysis. And I think Stacy has a link to one of those webinars. If you're doing thematic analysis, I'd highly recommend going back and watching one of those videos just to see how people have arranged things. But if I'm doing that in first phases, I might actually have no codes at all as I'm reading and rereading and thinking about the data. But I probably am going to create memos, which are ways that we track our notes and thoughts about the things we're seeing in the data. I'll probably have some memos that help me think about what I'm seeing and track that. And then as I move through and start to actually code my data, I get a fairly long list of codes, and I'm not quite sure yet at all how these fit together. And then as I show you the various folders and the progression of the codes and how they look like, this is, you know, after we've done most of the coding and we're really starting to think about how things look, you can see that we're starting to create some hierarchy with our codes and so on. You'll see that these continue to develop until I get to the last phase where I've got fairly tight themes, and all of the topics within those themes, I'm very confident that they belong together. Along the way, I am memoing about this, keeping track of my notes, and having kind of a history of how those codes developed over time. And in a moment, I'll show you how to do a code book, which will help you track that process. Now, alternatively, if we're switching gears and thinking, well, that's not really the way I'm approaching my data, I'm more approaching my data in terms of deductive coding, I kind of rearranged some of these codes to help you think about how we might do things in that process. And one of the first things I wanted to show you is you might even begin your coding structured discussions with your team by having a discussion about what you think are some of the main themes or topics in your data and what it's likely to be. This may or may not be based on your question structure, or it may be just on themes that you've already identified from the literature and you're going in to have a look at those and so on. So I have created a mind map in the NVivo project. These are great to have a team discussion. They can be exported and used as a JPEG or PNG file. And you can easily use this to have that team discussion and kind of guide it. And notice this little button at the top that I can create these mind map kind of bubbles and turn that immediately into my coding structure. So if I just select the place I want that to go and I come back, and let's hope it works, but I think it usually does, and I come back to my potential themes, I now can see that I've got some initial codes created. We don't have anything in them yet, but we know what we think belongs there and so on. So then I bring in my data and we start looking at what we're seeing, and we start to see how some of these other codes are developing. We have our initial codes, but we have some additional ones. We're kind of seeing how it fits together, and then we keep progressing, and eventually we end up in kind of the same place that we ended up before in our inductive coding. And I'm not saying you would always have the same results, but I'm saying more or less you're either moving from lots of codes to a few well-developed codes, or you're starting with a few ideas about what you think you're going to find. But the benefit of qualitative research is staying open to what else you might find, and you're going to bring that with you into the project. So the other thing that I want to show you is how we might also use the code book. And if you saw this in one of the earlier demonstrations earlier in the week, I'm sorry for the repeat, but it's worth repeating, I think. A code book is actually a feature built into NVivo that allows you to export your list of codes and everything that you've got assigned to them in terms of their definitions and so on. So I can go up here and I can go to Share, Export, Export Codebook. And what happens is NVivo says, okay, I can create a list of the codes in that. I don't want all of those right now. Let me just take this last one. And I'm going to include the number of files and references. And I'm going to export the codebook. And it's going to create a Word document that includes all of the definitions or descriptions that I've assigned to my code and so on. Let me just move this up so you can see it. So now you should be seeing the Word document. You can see the name of my code, the description, the number of files and references. And what I highly recommend is that you actually export those code books and keep them at very regular points in your analysis. And in fact, I like to keep everything in one place. So I usually create a folder for my code books and I import them back into NVivo. So I've built in an audit trail or history of how my codes have developed over time. So that's a really great way for you to be able to share that information with your committee members, even if they're not using NVivo. You can export your code book at regular basis. Explain to them that the headings are your codes and the descriptions are your definitions and so on, and that becomes a great discussion tool. I talked a little bit about memos, and one of the things that I wanted to show you is you can create folders under your memos heading here. This is a list of all of the folders and items in your project. And you may want to be keeping your memos associated with various phases of your project. So you could have different memos for different phases. You might have some memos when you're just developing your list of codes. if you actually have been coding and thinking about things that you want to search for, I actually always keep a memo of search terms. And so that later on, when I want to go back and look for certain words that are interesting and I can use a text search query to find those, I keep a list of those as I'm finding them as a memo in NVivo. But the other part that you can do is also link your memos to certain pieces of the data using the NVivo feature called See Also Linked if you're using the Windows version. And this becomes very handy when you go to export the memo, and you can export it as a Word document. You can export it including the See Also links. And that produces the memo that has all of the words on it, all of your thoughts about, let's say, a certain code or theme that's developing. And it includes a link to the quote that you had linked there when you were doing the research. So Effie, who was quite impressed with this term dingbatter, puts in the reference where she found it. So those Word documents really help you when you're going to write up, no matter which place you're sitting in the analysis process. So the last thing I wanted to show you, and Veronica will be ready to take it back over in just a second, is that there are many ways that you can visualize things that you're seeing in your data. And I wanted to show you just a little bit more of those than we've seen in some of the previous demonstrations. So let's say I've got some of my codes and I really want to think about what's happening within the code, or what are the most prevalent topics that have been coded there, and so on. And in earlier demonstrations, I showed how you could word frequency query or text search query across a series of documents. But you can also do some of those queries where you kind of look within a code, not just a list of documents. So I'm going to show you by selecting one of my other codes here, balance, and by right-clicking, I can come down to the visualize. And visualize has a whole lot of options that allow you very quickly to get a sense of what you're seeing. So one of the things that people seem to love is a word cloud, and a word cloud actually represents visually word frequency. So if I run a word frequency query on my code for balance, I can get a sense of what's actually in that code, what words are being frequently used in this code or topic we've got called balance, and what does that look like. And in a moment, the word cloud will produce a kind of a representation of the most frequently used words in this code. And the bigger the font, the more font represents frequency. So the bigger the font, the higher frequency of the use of that word. And that can be really helpful both to drive your analysis further, but also to share with others. The clouds can be exported and inserted as JPEGs or PNG or picture files into PowerPoints or into other kinds of pieces of information, interim reports, and so on. And my experience is that once people understand that the word cloud represents frequency, they love them because they understand what that means. So you can do a word frequency on your code, and when you do a word frequency query, it produces this list of terms. It's the same representation that we just saw in the word cloud, but you can also run a text search query and look for certain terms and where they occur in context. So I'm not going to take the time to do that now, but know that by right-clicking over a certain word, you could run a text search query just for that word and find it where it occurs in that word cloud. So those can be really helpful when you're trying to figure out how you're going to represent some of the information. Again, I'm not going to show you all of these things, but I did want to show you one more. You can come back and have a look at some of these yourself in the sample project. You notice that you can chart your coding, you can chart where things intersect with this code and so on. But the last one I wanted to show you was this explore diagram. And it can also be a great representation depending on what you choose to include here. This is showing you the number of cases and files that are included in this code. Perhaps I just want to show the number of files and who it is that's being coded to this code and so on. So I hope that gives you a few ideas. I would like to emphasize that just as Veronica is kind of illustrating that there are many, many ways to present qualitative information and it must align with your methods, I'd like you to take away from this that NVivo is a very flexible tool that you will use to create and align with your methods so you can show things from your analysis in the best way possible. Track them with your code book, track them with your memos, use some visualizations, export what you need to share with other people. So that's it for me.
Great, thank you, Laura. So, Laura, can you take, I sent you some questions. Let me just take one. Veronica's just getting set up, so let me go to a question that people had for you. So people had a lot of questions about the difference between inductive, deductive, and inductive analysis. So I've used semi-structured narratives with given topics and then conducted an inductive analysis from the answers. Would that be considered inductive or deductive since the topics were provided beforehand in the semi-structured narrative?
So I'm not sure if Veronica will prefer to answer that question.
Oh yeah, okay.
Yeah, that one is, she is the methods expert, and which one is which in that, I'm not sure. So maybe we'll leave that one for Veronica.
Oh, here's one, sorry, here's a better NVivo one. How can I learn more about autocode? Do I need to arrange my docs by question numbers, or do I need to make arrangements? How do I know if I have coded the adequate percentage of my data?
So there's two different questions there. So for auto coding, you can use auto coding. This varies a little bit depending on the version of NVivo you're using and the platform. So if you're using the most recent version, which I'm showing here, and Windows, you can do auto coding by structure, or you can do it by a number of other things. You can code for sentiment and so on. So as I showed before, if I come up here and I select one of my interviews or a series of interviews, let's say I'm going to select Dorothy, Betty, and Charles. If I wanted NVivo to code by my question structure, I do need to have styles using the heading levels that are available in Word. I need to have my transcript set up that way. But if I do, then NVivo will go through and it will take all of the material written beneath a certain question number, and the question number is a heading, and it will group them together. You don't have to do that, but you can do that. Often people say, well, the interviewee didn't really answer the question only in that part, and then you're going to go through and code, and you're probably going to code for the answers in multiple ways anyway. Also notice that if you're using Windows, you can ask NVivo to identify themes. We showed that in one of the earlier presentations in this week. And then NVivo runs through the data and uses the frequency of words and phrases to kind of take a guess at, that's how I would put it, at what the commonly used themes are. And it's simply by counting words and phrases and so on. So it's certainly not the answer. It doesn't do your analysis for you, but it can give you a leg up on your analysis and help you as a double check.
All right, perfect. Thank you so much, Laura. That was fantastic. Now that we know the structure and the outline that we need for related to our codes and our themes, now we can start to write. So, oh, and by the way, we've been writing all along. I do know that some people make the mistake of moving to writing too quickly. Try to avoid that if at all possible. You want to make sure that you have your outline ready to go. And that actually, as we'll see in the next few slides, can start you writing in a very structured, organized way. All right, so in the analysis that I showed you earlier, just briefly, of course, I have determined that I have 3 main themes. So what are the experiences of international students using the Pecha Kucha presentations in their EAP courses? They feel emotions due to those PK presentation experiences. They're aware of cognitive processes used during PK presentation processes, which, by the way, was a major theme and ended up being a conclusion in Chapter 5, which is the connection here between Chapters 4 and 5. And then the development of strategies through PK presentation experiences. So let's see how that then can help us start writing. So once we have this outlined, this right here becomes the overall structure for presenting our findings. And all we need to do is have the key information. So let me give it a go. The data revealed 3 main themes: emotion, cognitive processes, and strategy use. Well, I've said in basically what I need to say, but I haven't used all of my words to help guide the reader and let them know that this is really going to move them into the findings and exactly what we're going to talk about. So I didn't refer back to the research questions and the topic or the phenomenon, so I need to do that. And I really didn't use all the keywords from my themes in this left-hand column. So let's go and see what this structure then will look like. And it is definitely a formula. So we have the phenomenon, which is the topic, the research question focus, plus the themes, 1, 2, and 3. If I have 5 themes, then it would be all 5 themes, okay? So let's see what that looks like in writing then, once I give it another go here. So for this time, I went ahead and color-coded just to make sure that I have everything that I need. So in the first part of this sentence, I have, for the international undergraduate students in this study, their experiences with PK presentations included 3 main themes. All right, do I have my research question and topic? Yes, I do. Perfect, I can go on, and now it's simple listing. I can just list my themes and keep the entire main keywords. And have I used all of them? Yes, I have. There's little ambiguity going on here. The reader knows exactly where I'm going. This guiding sentence is the guide for your entire findings. Okay? I might follow this statement up with giving a little bit of a foreshadowing, if you will, of each theme, but I don't have to. I can do something else later on. And I can kind of show you how this is going to look once we get more writing in. All right, so how does that formula then come into play when I start writing my themes? So I have my PK, I have my research question, I have my theme, feelings of emotions. Now, within this theme, I had 3 main topics: being overwhelmed, experiencing the emotions due to being an international presenter, and experiencing emotions related to public speaking and PK presentation requirements. So, what's my formula? Let's take a look at it. We put everything on the left. Here I have the phenomenon, the research focus, the theme. I already know how to do that. I did that in the last one. But now I have to include the topics 1, 2, and 3. All right? Kind of similar to what I just did, actually. It just has an extra component. So let's try it. So I'm going to actually use 2 sentences for this because it's a little bit more complex. So the EAP undergraduate international student data related to the first theme of emotions, feeling emotions, included the many emotions participants experienced as they planned and presented their PK presentations during their EAP courses. Whew, that was a bit of a mouthful. It might not be the best that I can do, but you know what? It's my crappy first start, okay? So I'm gonna keep it. I'm not gonna worry about refining it right now. I'm just keeping it. Do I have all the requirements? Research questions and topic is covered. I even have my theme that's covered. So I am good. Let's get the rest of this in here where I tell the reader what the main topics I will cover are in this theme of feeling emotions. In this theme, The participants discussed feeling emotions due to being overwhelmed, experiencing emotions due to being an international presenter, and experiencing emotions due to public speaking and PK presentation requirements. All right, I think I've got them all in there, so let's check. We've got all these keywords here, and I could also have drawn a line to the feeling emotions up above in that first sentence. It's all about structure. It's not about being pretty with our language, it's just getting it in, all right? So let's see what this looks like if I put it all together. I'm not going to read it again. I'll let you all take a gander at that. And then I want to add one more thing here. This overall guiding sentence, some people might refer to it as a thesis statement, covers the entire findings section. This is very, very important. I might even include a visual here to show my readers exactly where I'm taking them. The more organized we can be, the happier our readers will be. All right, now let's look at how this structure and formula play out in an internal structure. So when I'm actually bringing in the quotes and talking about, kind of justifying, making my case for that a theme and a topic exists. So here are, I still have my research question guiding me. I have my theme now, and now I'm going to delve into this first topic, being overwhelmed. I see now that with my outline, and by the way, I did use NVivo for this project, and I have to say, it was beautiful. I could just look at my outline of my codes and I could just write from there. It was really, really beautiful, and I highly recommend that because this particular project had a lot of data, and it was very helpful. So, all right, let's get to the structure and the formula of this writing. So here we have the overall research question topic, the motions for the theme, and the topic. Here's our formula. Phenomenon, research question, theme, topic. We've already done that before, so we know how to do it. Now I just have to say my 2 points. All right? So over here, I've added another color to show the subpoints under being overwhelmed with college demands and with responsibilities of being a presenter. So let's see what this question or what this sentence looks like now. In the theme of feeling emotions, the EAP international students were overwhelmed during their undergraduate and PK presentation experiences because of college demands and the responsibilities that come with being a presenter. I think I've done a pretty good job here. Let me just do a quick check. I have my research question and my topic. I think I've used all of my keywords. Now I have more keywords. You notice I have the keywords of the overall theme, feeling emotions, plus the topic, which is overwhelmed, plus my main points I'm trying to talk about. Okay. Now we have to show the data. Let's try it out. Now we just extend this. I'm going to leave out the keywords of the phenomenon and the focus of the research question because I've already set the stage for that. So now I can just focus on the theme, the topic, the point, and the quotes. So let's see what that looks like. Leah, Ian, and Ming shared their experiences of feeling overwhelmed with the demands of college, which caused them to lose sleep, forget tasks, and realize time management issues. Okay, so I'm setting up the quotes that my reader is about to see. All right, so I'm going to leave my sentence over on the left-hand column just to remind me because order matters. If I present Leah first, I better present her first here. Okay, and I'm not going to read the entire quote. It saves a little bit of time here. And then Ian had a similar idea that he reported out, so I present that. Because my quotes are more than 40 words, I go ahead and block quote them. That's why you see them the way they are. And now I have a pretty good start to this theme of feeling emotions and being overwhelmed. So let's see what it looks like when we put the pieces together. I'm going to pull back in my opening from the feelings, emotions opening, and then I'm going to talk about just emotions and being overwhelmed, and then I present the data. If it seems simple, I have to say, using the formula, it is. If I've done my work in the data analysis process and done a good job of organizing, then I'm good to go and I'm good to start writing. All right, so getting this less than perfect draft out is important, and that's what we've been doing all along. We just want to get the ideas in. So here are some things to think about as far as structure. Organizing your themes and subtopics, critically important. Those come in to play with your research design. What makes the most sense with the design that you're using and why? The importance of analysis that I just mentioned. We've got to make sure that we spend time in the analysis phase. I normally tell people expect about a month to stay in your data analysis, depending on how much time you have to devote. Also, try to sit down with your analysis, and I would say with your writing, but most importantly with your analysis for long stints of time, 2 hours or more. You will get a lot more progress moving forward if you can do that. And then, as we saw in the formula, repeating keywords is critical, and then using NVivo and Citavi to help us manage all of this and all of the data. So it's about the structure, making our case, identifying significant data that goes with each theme, ordering the data according to the ideas that we want to present, and then determining the amount of the quote. We don't need, I've seen a lot of young scholars put big, long quotes, and what happens with that is the reader's trying to connect it with the point that you told us you were trying to make, but because the quote is so large, we can't make sense of it. So help the reader out by using quotes to the amount that you actually need to make your point. You don't need everything. And then, of course, using NVivo and Citavi again. All right, so then we have revising, and I'm going to just go over this real quick. Know your chair's preferences, that's key. Make sure that what you're doing, and this could probably come first, right? Know what your chair wants you to do and prefers, maybe by looking at some documents that she or he has chaired before, and refer to that, or just asking them. Connecting ideas and quotations come with inserting transition words, repeating keywords, which is our formula. If we're using that, we're good to go, because we have our overall theme, our main topic and points, and the words associated with our design. The last things that are critical is that we would need to add introduction and conclusions to our themes. Repeat, again, keywords, and use visuals where we can to help the reader. And now's the time to go back and look at how we're introducing quotes and using those strong verbs. And I believe Jessica spoke about that a couple of days ago. Very, very critical in this process of revising. All right, then the main findings, I just want to show the slide real quick, just to give you a general idea of what those main sections are. You have the introduction to the chapter, which includes the organization, what the reader should expect to see. You overview the study. Most times you provide this. And then, I apologize for the sirens in the background. The context and setting description, the participant descriptions, and then the presentation of the findings. And normally that comes out in themes for qualitative research, or if we're using grounded theory or narrative, that's going to look a little different. But and then we have a summary of the chapter. And just remember that your university templates are important. There may be other things or less things that they want to see. Sometimes universities don't want to see an overview of the study in Chapter 4. Whew. All right. That is all I have for you. It's been amazing. I hope that you all got something out of this. And if you have a couple questions, I can talk about those.
Great, thank you, Veronica. That was excellent. I really liked how we, or you, not me, you all integrated how you can use the software to help you as a tool to help you organize and analyze. And so I just want to go over some of the resources we have available. We'll take a few questions at the end. So first off, Dissertation by Design. This is a link that's in the handout to all their different services to help you with your writing. And as you can see, they know a lot and are experts in that. So if you need assistance, please go to the link and you can learn more. This is just showing you an overall look at how Citavi and NVivo can help you with your writing process, and then the different products we have to help with that too. And then for Citavi, we have, this is a link right to the trial, a 30-day trial, and then a link to more information on how to learn a Citavi. Jenny has great videos that are, pretty short and easy to follow that you can help you learn how to use Citavi. And then for NVivo, showing you how it can help throughout your research process, but also the different products that we have to help you be able to do the research. So NVivo transcription, then NVivo desktop, NVivo collaboration. And then a lot of people asked about how I can learn more about NVivo. Well, first, here's the link to the trial for the different products, but some free resources to help you learn. We have our customer hub, our help menu, on-demand webinars, but then NVivo Academy, this NVivo core certification course is really very good, and you get a certification after you take it too. And the community, so this is what I work on, and bringing this type of institute and sessions to you is what I do, and we got a ton of good feedback on that. So if you join the community, we'll be able to send you information about other events we're having. And I also just want to have a plug for the NVivo virtual conference that will be in September. Please, if you would like to submit an abstract, they're due at the end of this month, and the link's here on how to submit the abstract. We'd love to hear from you with that. And we'll be announcing our early career research grant very soon. It's over $25,000, or it's $25,000 over 2 years. Right now, we're looking for reviewers. So if you're interested in that, please go to this link. But I think we'll be able to maybe take 2 questions. I think, Veronica, one question people had, it was definitely the difference or how to work with deductive versus inductive. We had a lot, I think you saw that, a lot of questions around that.
Yeah, I think most of the times, and I think I probably forgot this in my presentation, but most of the times we work in both places. We, especially if we start off with deductive analysis, inductive analysis, or inductive processes will emerge because we'll start to identify themes that were not, or ideas that were not in the original framework that we used. And then, the main, I would say, was it about difference? Was that
I think question? It's when to use it. It seemed like to me a lot of the questions are like, when do I use which, and can I use them together?
I see. Yes, we can use them together, but know that that's a lot of work on your part as a researcher. It does increase the trustworthiness of your study, but you would actually have a section on inductive findings and deductive findings separately. You would not compare them because that's it's like comparing apples and oranges. But I know of several people who have done both and had amazing discoveries on both sides.
All the panelists and all the presenters, because it was a great 4 days. We just got excellent feedback from a bunch of people saying they learned a lot and they really appreciated having this opportunity to be part of the Institute. So thank you, Veronica and Laura and Jenny, for all your hard work this last week.